1 Mac,
2 Macs, 3 Macs,
4 Macs, lots of A7S3s.
and yet none of those Macs can actually just update firmware on my A7S3s. I mean, Sony, you're killing me. No Big Sur support? I had to wait this long just to get S-Cinetone, but Allison saved the day, and she brought her Surface Pro. So I've always been a big Mac fan, but that just drives me insane. Sony, come on now. So about a month ago, I started shooting all of my vlogs in S-Log3 because I started kind of getting the process down a little bit and started to see the advantages of using S-Log versus just like a natural profile. I've never been a big fan of natural profiles. They have too much saturation and they have too much contrast, and it just doesn't really give you the dynamic range that you really get from a camera like the A7S3. So I've been using S-Log, I really liked it, but for vlogs and for everyday content, it is a little bit more work to shoot in all S-Log and worry about exposure and getting things right and then grading it all in post just to get it to look how you want. When I heard about S-Cinetone coming out, I was very intrigued to try it because if I could get more dynamic range and a more cinematic-y, I hate that word, look on footage without having to actually grade it, would save a lot of time on vlogs. But I'm really curious how it looks and is it okay using straight out of camera and not touching anything at all. So this entire vlog is going to be shot in S-Cinetone. I am not going to do anything at all in post-production except for maybe fixing some white balance issues. No LUTs, no color grading at all. Let me know what you think. I know all you big coffee snobs are gonna say, ew, how can you drink a Keurig? You know what? It's about convenience. I ain't got time for all that crazy stuff you fancy coffee people do with the French press and pour. Ain't nobody got time for that. Keurig for the win. Plus, when you put the amount of cream that I put in coffee, the creamer is ultimately the thing I taste the most. I have no problem taking the extra time when I'm shooting behind the camera, like for client work or something that I'm in control of the camera and not necessarily rushing like in a vlog, putting the right time into getting perfect exposure and perfect white balance for shots. But I realized when I went to S-Log3 specifically for vlogs, I'd have to worry more about the exact exposure that I had, try to get the white balance better, because I noticed that when you don't do things correctly in S-Log, it tends to not come out as great as you hoped. So I would love to be able to have a profile again, similar like I had in the past with kind of a more natural profile that just looks great out of camera, that I don't have to worry as much about it, where I can use auto ISO and auto white balance and still come up with a pretty good or great looking image without having to do a lot of work, just for vlogs. Do not be deceived, even though it looks nice outside and the sun is shining, we're still in what we consider like our last winter. It warmed up to like 70 degrees last week, and now it's back to like 32 degrees and windy today, so soon, spring is coming, soon. So the thing that I'm most curious about when it comes to S-Cinetone is what kind of dynamic range do you get in comparison to S-Log3. One of the things that I've loved about S-Log3 is the dynamic range and that extra detail you get in the shadows and the highlights simultaneously. So for me to switch to S-Cinetone, I'd still want to be able to have at least a very good dynamic range, because I feel like having the A7S III, one of the things you have is a camera with outstanding dynamic range, and to just completely cripple that by using a profile that doesn't showcase it kind of seems silly. So I'm going to shoot some shots side by side out here, and then we'll go inside, take a look at them, compare them, and see what we think. All right, so let's open up a project here, and we're going to throw these both side by side so we can take a look at what we got here. Okay, so this is S-Cinetone here, and as I look at it right away, it looks like the dynamic range is pretty good. Now, you weren't outside to obviously see this, but it is very, very bright on the left side of that screen there. So the shadows looked very, very dark in comparison to how bright that actually is. So I'm pretty impressed with how much detail there still is there for just being S-Cinetone, not even a log. When I bump over to S-Log here, you can see that naturally right away there looks like there's a lot more detail in the shadows because it's a flat type of footage. But if I kind of do what I normally would do to get this log footage basically back to kind of what we want as the standard, then you can very quickly see that it's not a huge difference. So if I naturally would, crush the blacks and a little bit more than that than they currently are, and maybe bring down the midtones a little bit so it's not overexposed outside there. If I go between these, S-Cinetone is right here, S-Log3 kind of base corrected is right there. You'll see that it's not a very big difference. If you look closely in those shadows, you can see that there still seems to be just as much detail in S-Cinetone. It's definitely different in the blues. You can see how much different the blue of the actual sky is. Pretty big difference in that. It's kind of like a richer, darker blue in S-Cinetone and a little bit of a lighter baby blue in S-Log. Both of these shots outside were the exact same settings, so same white balance, and then I just bumped the exposure up a little bit more in S-Log to obviously be able to overexpose just a little bit, so the white balance wasn't any different. All that was exactly the same. If I were to take that same preset that I just made for both of these, that I made in the other shot right there, here's S-Cinetone right here, there's S-Log. Maybe brighten that up a tiny bit so it could be closer to the exact match that we have with S-Cinetone. That's about right. You can see not too much of a difference there. Man, the detail's really good. Once again, the blue is a little bit different. You could even see a little bit of a different cast right there on the buildings on the left-hand side. It is a little bit different. So if you see here, when I flash back and forth, S-Log has a little bit more of a hint of green versus magenta like Cinetone does. Did another shot here with me standing there with kind of sunlight behind me, which is always tricky for cameras to deal with. There's S-Cinetone, S-Log. Cinetone, S-Log, Cinetone, S-Log, Cinetone, S-Log. You can definitely see, as I said, a difference in color. You can tell a lot, actually, even on those steps in the background there, that naturally there's S-Cinetone and here's S-Log. You can kind of naturally see that there's more green there in S-Log. Now, obviously, that's easy to fix in post, so it's not like we can't pull that out, but you can see how it is a difference as well in the skin tone, which is obviously supposed to be something that does very, very well, but skin tone is definitely different a little bit. Cinetone there, S-Log. Not a huge difference. So this first time I'm seeing the footage, first time I'm experimenting with it, so kind of my first impressions are the fact that S-Cinetone does a very good job of not really looking like it loses that much dynamic range at all. Obviously, I'm sure it loses some, and obviously this is a kind of a quick impressions, but at first glance, it's a really nice looking profile that kind of gets the best of both worlds quickly. So more like the dynamic range of an S-Log and more of just nice natural Alec camera colors, like something like a natural profile, but kind of blending the two really nicely. And with an additional LUT on top of that, it kind of has a nice, very nice clean look that I'd be pretty happy with for a vlog. So like I said, this is first impression stuff. This is just the very first time I've installed it on this camera, testing it out right away and kind of giving my thoughts once I kind of do some videos with it, maybe do some color grading with it and kind of get a feel for the difference between this and S-Log. I'll try to report back as often as possible because, as always, this channel is about providing value in any way possible, and maybe you are considering using Cinetone or wondering what the difference is between S-Log and Cinetone, so hopefully this gives you a little bit of a side-by-side comparison to get a feel for whether or not this is for you. Overall, I think it's a great looking profile so far, and I'm excited to test it out more, and I'm very excited that it came to the A7S III. So anytime you can get continuous improvements in a camera that is already outstanding is a win for everybody. So thanks for watching. Hope this was helpful. Let me know below which one that you like better, and are you currently shooting on S-Log or S-Cinetone? What have you found out? Share your knowledge below. See ya.